Hey, what's going on, people? Now, if you are as old as me, you remember the old saying, be all that you can be. That was a phrase for the U.S. Army. So now we're going to say, be all that you can be, commit fraud, and then retire. That's what we're going to talk about on today's episode of the Friday Fraudster. All right, let's go.
Welcome to the Friday Fraudster podcast. Join them as they discuss sad, funny, and sometimes disturbing fraud stories. Be sure to catch past episodes on your favorite podcasting platform or go to www.fridayfraudster.com.
All right, my friends, welcome to this episode of Friday Fraudster. Be all that you can be. And you know what? While I have your attention and while I have you here, I want you all to do me a huge favor. I want you to go and take a look at my LinkedIn profile. Now, there's a reason that I want you to do it. You can wait until after the show, but the reason that I want you to do it is because I'm inviting each and every one of you to the Talk Business Think Audit Summit hosted by myself and Dr. Sabine Charles. It is going to be 3 hours of fabulous CPE. Let me tell you why. First hour, we're going to teach you to talk in the language of business. One of the most common complaints auditors get is that we don't understand the business, and Dr. Charles is going to tell you how to talk business. Now, that second hour, we're going to talk artificial intelligence because that's a hot buzzword, but I'm here to tell you it is not as complex as you think it is. Because what I'm going to do is boil down those AI risk into a few things that you need to understand and be aware of. And then that third hour is going to be a fabulous hour where we talk about your career. You see, we're going to introduce what I like to call your audit career roadmap. We're going to talk about the different phases of your audit career. So, February the 6th from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m., go to my profile, click the link. It'll take you to my website. Don't just click the LinkedIn link where it says, I'm going to attend this thing. There's an external link that'll take you to my website. We hope to see you there. So now with that said, I'm going to bring up today's special guest host. Now we had two special guest hosts today, but our second one is having some issues, and he'll tell you about it next week, probably, if he really, really feels like it. So Christine is sick today. So Christine, we hope you feel better. And she is joining us from YouTube. So listen, you guys, sometimes LinkedIn is a little finicky. Sometimes it doesn't show comments, and sometimes it drives you really crazy, especially if you are listening and watching on the app. So go over to my YouTube channel. I'm going to drop a link into the chat if I can. Today, I've got so much going on and I've only got two hands, so I may not get to it until after the show. Michael is here. He says, good afternoon, everyone. You love these weekly episodes. And you know what? I appreciate Michael. He shares it with his community every week. And my man, Clarence. So Clarence was on Audit Bites Tuesday, you know, the best live podcast where we talk about auditing. And he was having problems on the app. And so he decided to go over to YouTube too. So you guys can join Clarence over there. And Jim is like, wait a minute, what? Jim, what's the confusion, my friend? By the way, Jim, I got your message. I'll be sending you one back, an email, probably tomorrow morning. Jay, my man, Jay is here. We've got Stephanie from Idaho. We've got Shri. She's over on LinkedIn too. Marsha is here. Hey, Marsha, we hadn't seen you in a couple of weeks. Hopefully all is well. Ooh, Karina is here. You know what? I could do these shout outs all day. Let's just get into it. So listen, Bob, why don't you tell? I forgot to introduce Bob. Bob, tell everybody who you are, man. Tell everybody who you are, what you do.
Who I am and what I do. You know, this is the second week that I've been here, and I appreciate that. I must have passed the first time for Robert to have me back. And I so was thinking after the fact that it was a long-time listener, first-time caller. I completely forgot to say that. So maybe long-time listener, second-time caller. I don't know. You can say that. Let's see. I'm former former internal auditor, recovering, and CIA at that. So props to all those that watch that are either CIAs or getting their CIAs. I can completely relate to the angst that goes with studying for that thing. So didn't use it for very long, because then I got into a risk advisor position with a regional bank, and on the side, I'm also a financial coach. So I do kind of front of the house and the back of the house, depending on what I'm doing with the bank, and really get to enjoy that part where I was on the front side as a banker, and now as more of an analyst advisor. Get to do that with all the fraud stuff, and I'm glad that none of the stuff I ever see is to the extent of what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, today is a doozy, so you all need to just hold on tight. We've talked about some crazy things, and I got to tell you all, today it almost beats out every other story we've had. I think that there's one that was probably worse. Now, here's what's really interesting about when we do this. So for most of us, it's Friday, but Sadaf, it's Saturday morning for Sadaf. Or Saturday, it's Saturday morning, right, Sadaf? I think it is morning time for you. Anyway, so we have people all over the planet that kind of tune in to hear what crazy story we're going to talk about on this show. So, Bob, let me ask, were you ever in the military?
I was not. I have military family, but I myself have not been.
So my father served in the Air Force for 20 years. My uncle, my father's brother, served, I don't remember how long. Then I had another uncle by marriage that served in the military. Oh, actually two additional uncles who served in the military. So, serving in the military is quite interesting, because my dad, after he retired, he then went back to work for the military as a civilian contractor. Isn't that crazy?
Liked it that much?
Yeah, I guess so. He really, really liked it. He really, really liked it. So, yeah. So then he served as a contractor. And so he actually retired as a contractor. That's pretty interesting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so now I would think, though, with any country, the military budget has to be large, like trillions of dollars flowing through the military, because you're buying planes, trains, automobiles. You've got the men and women who are fighting, the men and women who are fixing things, the men and women who are serving food, doing laundry. It's a huge operation.
Oh, yeah.
So I'd imagine it'd be pretty hard to steal from the military, because if they find you stealing, they just kill you, right? I mean, that was probably a bad
It'd be
joke,
easier, but
ooh, you know what? It would be easier. Hey, this person is stealing. We just,
And I think in this case, there might be some people that might be lining up to volunteer for the job, based on what is coming out from different sources on. They're not happy with her. Military, those that have served are not real happy with her.
Yeah,
why would they be? But
well, what's the old saying? You don't mess with children, and you don't mess with the military.
And Texas, you don't mess with Texas either, but
you definitely don't mess with Texas. Yeah. You don't mess with Texas, that's for sure. So here's what I'm wondering for all of our friends listening. Any of you all serve in the military? And what was that like? Anybody serve in the military, and what was that like? So yeah. Now I will say, I remember when I was young, because my father was in the military, we would always be on base. Mm-hmm. So you would go to the base to play basketball. You would go and you would have discounted and or a lot of free stuff on the base. You would go shopping on the base, and everything was a whole lot cheaper. And I didn't realize back then that some of the people that were there weren't actually in the military. They were contractors. They were civilians, and they were contractors. I didn't realize that. So today, what we're going to talk about is a young woman who was a military contractor, and they found out recently that She was committing fraud. She was stealing from the military. They think that she had been stealing for about 6 years. Now, that's a long time. Um, but I think what's really shocking is the things that she was able to buy with what she stole. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to run through a list of some of the things that she stole. And what I want you all to do as an audience, I want to see if anybody, and if you've read the story, don't tell anyone else. We want to see if anybody can guess the approximate amount that she stole. What do you think about that, Jim? Jesus, Bob. I've got Jim on the brain because I'm reading his comment right now. He said, "Is anyone else seeing the event?"
Well, Bob is, so I'm not sure what Jim's doing. Jim, maybe you might need to go to a different platform. Can he hear you? I can hear you. Mics are on this week, so
yeah, my mic is on this week. Okay. So let's run through the list, and if I forget anything, then you can kind of help me, like nudge me or something.
oh my, it's quite a list too.
Oh, it is quite a list. So apparently she had a 2018 Maserati. Now, I don't know if you know how much a Maserati costs, but it's a lot. She had a Land Rover. She had approximately, what was it, 39 different properties, or was it 39 different vehicles?
31 properties, 78 vehicles. 78 vehicles.
78 vehicles. Wait a minute. My newest number is saying 80 vehicles and 31 properties. Okay. She had, well, on top of the car, she had a few motorbikes as well.
Mm-hmm.
Now, her properties were in Florida, Texas, and a few other places. She had one property in Canyon Lake, Texas. Now, Canyon Lake is not a poor place. Let's just say that. She had a 1935 Plymouth sedan. So now this was a classic by all practical purposes. She had 6 bank accounts that held at minimum $32,000. So the smallest bank account had 32 million. I mean, had 32,000 in it. Sorry, $32,000 in it. Let's see. What am I missing here?
Well, to give people an over under, they had 18 million in cash. So, you know, if somebody's guess was below 10 million or even below 20 million, you're out of the ballpark already. And those bikes, all those motorbikes,
20 million.
Wow.
A little bit higher, Marsha. Just a little bit. Oh. Oh, now Jim is saying the link that he was on was blank, so he couldn't see us. That actually might be better for the show, though. I mean, I'm told I have a face for radio, so.
That makes 2 of us.
Ooh, now Christine asked a really good question. Would she have to serve in federal prison or army prison?
That is a good question.
That's a good question. All right, now LinkedIn user says 34 million. Oh, that's Stephanie. Stephanie is saying 34 million. Stephanie, still too low. Still too low. Okay, now I'm trying to make sure I didn't miss anything on some of the lists that I have. I'm running through several different news sites to try and find the list of all the things that she allegedly stole with the money.
Got that Mercedes-Benz GLS 63 AMG.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that one. Yeah.
Ducati.
Oh, the Ducati. Yes. So now a Ducati alone, let's see. That was the motorcycle. So a
Mhm.
Ducati alone is about, let's see, it's about 18,000 for a new one, but a classic one is probably about, actually a Ducati one model is about 40,000, but a classic, and I think this one was a classic, is probably about 70 to 100,000, I believe.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. I didn't see a picture of it, but some of those, I would guess, if it's a limited run, I knew somebody that had 2 of 6, and they put some money in them. But um, yeah, I don't even know which kind it was, other than they just said it was um, a Ducati. So yeah,
You know
70 to
what?
100.
She had a 1955 Ferrari Fratelli.
Oh wow, I didn't see that one.
Yeah, yeah, that was another one. And so now that is probably worth, let me see. By the way, a lot of this stuff is up for auction right now. For those of you who are big money bags, you might want to go to the auction and snag you some stuff. Okay, you all have to excuse me for looking down this week because, okay, so the Ferrari Fratelli, the 1955, is worth oh god, no one will actually give a good price on it. Let's see. Very interesting. Um, what I'm seeing is about $325,000.
Yeah.
All right, so now Marsha is saying 45 million. Still too low, Marsha. Now Michael is saying, what type of contractor job was she doing? Ding ding. There we go. Okay, so let's get into that. If I can get back to that notes page. She was being paid $135,000 a year to do. All right, you guys are gonna have to excuse me because this one, I've got so many tabs opened up on this one because it is absolutely insane.
She was a program manager, in essence.
There you go. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
So they have her official title as a civilian finance manager at the joint base in San Antonio, Fort Sam, Houston. So she was making $130,000 a year as a finance program manager. So she was responsible essentially for overseeing the money in a specific federal program. So now, while she was doing this role, she discovered an internal control weakness. And so this is how she committed the fraud. This is the alleged fraud that she committed. There was a program that she was over that was for the benefit of children. And I don't know, I can't remember exactly if it was for the educational benefit or for their mental health, but it was a program that was designed to benefit children. And the federal government paid for this program. Well, she created this program that benefited children. And I say that in air quotes because all of this was non-existent. And so then she created a series of fake invoices to collect payment from the federal government for this program. So by the nature of her job, she was able to find a weakness in the system and then exploited that weakness for her own gain. Okay, now Stephanie is saying $100 million. I think this is Carol. Hey, Carol. Carol is saying $100 million. Carol, did you cheat? Did you cheat? Yeah. So over a 6-year period of time, they're estimating that she stole $100 million from the Army. Now, the question that Bob and I had was how could you lose $100 million over a 6-year period of time and go undetected? Now, by the way, so let's talk really quickly about how it was caught. Because Bob and I were talking about that. So Carol said, no, she didn't cheat. She just said, nope, I didn't cheat. I'm not a cheater. Okay. Now, let's talk about how she was caught. So the IRS actually caught her. Apparently, with her income tax return, she said that she had $4,000 in revenue. And then her net was something like, what was it, Bob? $400 or something like that?
Yeah, she was 2,200 in revenue and she made $400 profit in
Yeah.
2017. So she reported taxes one time in the 7 years since she had this company going. This company that I think she had a pretty good acronym for child. I can't remember what the actual letters signified, but it was supposed to reflect the type of work that it would do if they actually did something that was in benefit of the program that she was in charge of dispersing the funds for.
Yeah. So the Army didn't even catch her, which makes me wonder about the internal control system in this particular unit, not the Army as a whole, but in this particular unit. So somehow she got flagged by the IRS. My speculation is that as a contractor, if her salary was $120,000 a year, you know, whenever her wages were reported to the IRS, it didn't match what her income tax return showed. And so that's kind of a red flag and an issue. Okay, so now let's just recap slowly before we move forward. We have an individual who was a civilian contractor with the Army. She was a finance manager, and as Marsha said, there you go, finance. She was a finance manager, and in her role as a finance manager, she was able to see some weaknesses in the system. She used those weaknesses to create a shell company that was supposed to be benefiting children by providing them with some services. Now, that company did not exist, did not provide those services, and we're assuming that she created some fake invoices to get paid. We're not sure how she got paid because it didn't say invoicing, but somehow she was able to get payment for services that weren't performed. The total estimate right now is about $100 million. She had several vehicles, up to about 70, and probably anywhere between 30 and 40 properties. A lot of the property and the other things that they recovered are now up for auction, will be up for sale in auction. They also recovered one bank account that had $16 million in it and several other bank accounts. The smallest one had at least $32,000 in it. Now, that's a lot. So Christine is asking, did it go undetected or did they think they were spending the money for kids when it just wasn't going to the children? That's a good point. So to Christine's point, they thought the money was going to the children and it wasn't. But that still begs the question, because we've talked about things like this in previous episodes where auditors, program auditors, and performance auditors typically go out and make sure that federal and state funding is actually going towards the purpose that it was supposed to serve.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened here with a dollar amount this high?
There was no audit. There was never an audit.
Yeah.
And there were multiple layers that could have done it because it was an extension program through a university. So there was no follow-up from them. And I don't know how much the university contributed to what that would have been, but it was I assume it was a land grant college. So those funds were coming from the government outside of the university. So maybe they were just recording that the funds were being spent.
So I know that this is no laughing matter. So for anyone watching who sees me laughing, let me just tell you why I'm laughing. I'm laughing because we have the best audience in the whole wide world here. I'm going to go back to the comments for a minute. And here's what's interesting. So I see one on LinkedIn that's not showing up for me in my streaming panel. Stephanie has said it was probably a fake gold-plated toilet on the fake invoice. Now, oh wait, here it is now. Now it showed up for me. There it is. Now, Marsha said maybe those properties were to house the kids.
Let's see, one of them in Colorado had 5 garages for those 78 cars, and the one in Maryland had another 7 garages.
Yep.
But they still have, 66 garages they need to go.
Right. Now, getting us back serious again, though, Michael asked, that's my other question. How was the money listed on the financial expenses. Yeah. And so, okay, so let's talk for a minute about that though, because what happens a lot of times when you get federal and or state grants, so one agency will get the grant, and then they will have sub-recipients for that grant. And so there's a purpose that needs to be met. And so a university might get a grant, and the grant is supposed to go to help the community do ABC. So the university will find somebody in the community that can fulfill the purpose of the grant. Now, in theory, the university or the primary agency should check up on the subrecipients, but that doesn't always happen, and or sometimes it doesn't happen timely. It may happen years down the road where they go in and do an audit and say, okay, you spent X number of dollars on this. Show me your receipts. Show me how many people attended. Say, for example, if it's a tutoring program, you'll ask to see the roster of people who attended. I remember one episode of this show, we had a food program. We had a couple of food programs where they were supposed to be feeding children, and they found out it was a scam because, well, the primary address listed was a 2-bedroom apartment. So surely they weren't feeding 1,000 kids a month out of a 2-bedroom apartment. So yeah, when you get these grants, or when you get federal or state funding, it's oftentimes hard to keep track of because you'll have a subrecipient or another subrecipient up under that. And it just makes it difficult.
Robert, I did find that they said, back to the IRS question, it just says they noticed the discrepancy between her salary as a government employee and her lifestyle. So that was kind of the, check what somebody drives in a parking lot, and with 78 vehicles in her case, that one could add up pretty quick because a few of them were a year's salary just by themselves. So they really keyed in on that Range Rover on a lot of stories.
Yeah, well, and that's what got me, because forget the Range Rover, man, for me, it was the Ducati. Are you serious? Like, oh my goodness. And then the Maserati.
Mm-hmm.
You see Range Rovers almost everywhere in semi-affluent areas, but you don't see a Maserati every day.
I didn't see a Bentley on that list either. So,
oh yeah. And Carol is saying she just saw one story that said her scam involved 40 stolen checks over 6 years. So that was the other thing too.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Bob.
I was going to say that what I've seen is that it was 40 payments over the course of those 6 years, which was in essence about $2.5 to $3 million every other month. And they said that she really started picking up on this in 21 through the end. And that's where the chain of command changed for efficiency's sake, which it really was more efficient for her, but not for the government.
Yeah. And so I read one story that speculated that one of the reasons it may not have gotten caught was because the volume of transactions wasn't enough. But I'm thinking, wouldn't you combine volume with dollar amount?
Yeah. And she subverted controls for the second signer as having somebody to oversee. She just digitally had the boss's signature or the initials on a lot of these payments. And she was the one, as we talked about earlier, was that she would initiate the payment and it was going to her vendor, and she was the contact person for that vendor, which should have been a flag in and of itself.
Yeah. And you bring up one of the primary points here when we talk about internal controls and segregation of duties. So I'm just going to kind of repeat what Bob just said. She was the worker at the organization. She was the one who approved the payments, but she approved payments to the company that she owned. And she wasn't the top level approver, but she forged her boss's signature on it. So everything ran through her. a single point of approval. Now, I saw my man Trent Russell here, and he was saying to Jim, can you post the link? And Trent, what link are you looking for Jim to post? Maybe we can help you out here, because maybe Trent couldn't see us either. Maybe it wasn't just Jim.
And they're having the best visual and audio experience that they could possibly have in not being able to see us,
Yes.
I'm just speaking for myself, I know.
Look, I know for me that would be the case. Now, Marcia is saying maybe she had a split personality. Oh. And Carol is saying, yes, they're also saying identity theft charges.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was another one. Now, Christine chiming in, this is why controls over vendors are so important. Completely different department that reviews vendors, validates ownership, location, etc. Yes. And then Christine is also saying, yes, also software as a service, which would push approvals through a workflow. Yeah. Oh, now Trent is saying Jim hooked him up. I wonder what happened. Maybe you guys couldn't see us on LinkedIn. It's pretty bad. LinkedIn sometimes does a very interesting job with these live streams. That's why, again, if you're having problems seeing us on LinkedIn, go over to subscribe to the YouTube channel. I mean, we need to increase the numbers over there anyway. Now, what else did we miss, Jim? I know Christine is really helping us out from afar on YouTube.
She's doing what she can when she's not here. So
right.
Well soon, Christine.
I mean, you couldn't expect us to do it all alone. We need Christine. So listen. Here's what I want everyone to do. Can you guess what are the charges? What are her charges? I want people to guess what her charges are. And while you guys are guessing, since there is a lag, here's what I'm going to do. I am going to once again remind you of the Talk Business Think Audit Summit hosted by Dr. Sabine Charles and myself on February the 6th from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. 3 hours of engaging CPE. The first hour, we're going to talk about the language of business. You see, a complaint that we often get as auditors is that we don't understand our client's business, which is why we're going to talk about that. Second hour, we're going to talk about AI. Look, you guys have seen me do deep fakes and face swaps live on air. You know that I love using Midjourney to create images. I'm a proponent of ChatGPT. So let's talk about the artificial intelligence risk and what we need to know. The next thing we're going to do is in the third hour, we're going to talk about your career, how you can map out your audit career. So join us. Go over to my website or just go to my profile and click the link in my profile. You'll see it. It says something like Talk Business Think Audit Summit down below, and there's a link to click. So somebody is guessing. This is probably Carol or Stephanie. This is Stephanie saying wire fraud. Yep, that was one of the charges. So anybody care to guess what wire fraud is an easy one though, Stephanie. You took the easy way out. I want you to try and figure out what some of the other ones are, because it's always wire fraud, right? Anytime it's involving money, it's always
the other one's not too hard to catch either. Because if you don't move it via wire, how else do you move it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was an easy one, Stephanie. I challenge you. So she made her initial court appearance on December the 14th. So she's already made an initial appearance. And I can tell you that she is facing a maximum of 20 years in prison for each fraud charge. That's a whole lot of time.
Yeah, I knew.
Now,
Christine would be asking that question. I'm sorry. I knew that Christine would be asking that question, so I went and made sure that if she was racked up on everything, she'd be in prison for 142 years if to put everything together. And I believe it's federal because it's a federal judge. There's nothing that says it's within a military court system. So
Yep. So that goes back to Christine's earlier question about which court would it be tried in. And Christine says, we really know how to make a girl blush. We're just telling the truth here, Christine. Now, Michael says, defrauding the U.S. government. All right. So she's being charged with 5 counts of mail fraud, 4 counts of engaging in a monetary transaction over $10,000 using criminally derived proceeds. That's a long one. 1 count of aggravated identity theft. Because Carol mentioned it earlier about the count of identity theft, but at some point she allegedly stole someone's ID in order to, heck, I forgot what she did when she allegedly stole that ID. Now there's so much within this case. Yeah,
Well, she
Marsha's
had an
saying,
email.
wow.
The email from Kathy that they never found Kathy. And back to your point about the 2-bedroom apartment, they went and they found that there was no actual physical address for this business. They were all UPS drop boxes.
Yep. Now I will say that is kind of common nowadays because for so many people who work as like solopreneurs or have small businesses or especially internet-based businesses, you don't want to put your home address, and so often you just have a mailing address and it's like a UPS location on one of those mailboxes. So I do understand that. Now Marsha is saying, "Wow, she's gonna die in prison." Yeah, yeah. She is probably going to die. Oh, wait, I didn't mean to click that. She is probably going to die in prison. So now let me see if I can pull up pictures of some of the items because, like I said, they are now at auction, and we either have actual pictures of some of the things at auction, or we know what those things look like because they have been tagged. Okay, so now let me get there. Give me just one moment, you guys, and we will pull up some of those photos. Okay. So here is the $3.1 million property in Preston, Maryland. It's a pretty nice looking place. I don't think this is the actual Maserati, but if you've never seen one before, here's a Maserati for you. There's a Range Rover, of course. I think we've all seen those, right? Valued at $250,000. Oops.
Oh, there's the boss.
Yeah, there's the boss. Now, there's an Aston Martin. Very nice. That's a file photo. That's not the one that she had.
I wonder what kind of condition some of those cars are in. I bet some of them pristine. I just wonder if they're all that, if she's got them in collector condition.
Yeah, I was wondering that too. So this is her $870,000 home in Lakewood, Colorado. That's kind of a small home for $870,000, right?
Yeah, but I think it's location.
Oh, yeah, it is 100% location. Man, we're moving a little slowly through here now. There we go. Here's a $2.3 million estate in Castle Rock, Colorado. Look at all those garages.
Mm-hmm.
Those garages are bigger than some people's apartment, right? Wait a minute. This is not the Ferrari Fratelli, is it?
I'm not sure. What was the picture that I came up with?
This is labeled as a Ferrari Fratelli.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. Here's the $1.1 million home in San Antonio, Texas. Man, look at that. That yard is really green, well taken care of. There's a big gate out front.
Was it?
Say again?
That wasn't the Ducati, was it?
Yeah, I think it may have been.
Yeah.
I think that one was mislabeled.
And there's a Plymouth.
Yeah, there's the 1935 Plymouth. That's a classic. Wow. This says it's a file photo as well, so this is probably not her actual one. There she is. Oh, by the way, the one thing that we forgot to mention, the one really important thing, she was allowed to retire and keep her retirement benefits, keep her pension benefits.
Yeah, and she was we talked about dying in prison. Right now, she's out with no bond. So they just let her on her own recognizance, free without bail. So,
well, and the thing is, in order to not have a bond, there are several circumstances that have to come together. And one of them is the judge has to not view you as a flight risk. So I'm wondering if maybe she had to surrender her passport because, and I'm sure they froze her bank accounts. So maybe she doesn't have access to money directly. But if she has a passport and friends who have money, I mean, that's still kind of a flight risk, right? So yeah, she's out with no bond, and that's kind of interesting. It's very
no bond.
interesting.
She's also a resident of Guam or former resident of Guam, which is a U.S. territory, right?
Yep.
So they said even with her being having ties to Guam, they deemed she was not a flight risk.
Well, and I think the thing with that though is if she were to go back to Guam, I'm assuming that she would be sent right back, right? It's a U.S. territory, so. But yeah. Oh goodness, Marsha says LinkedIn kicked her off, so now she's on YouTube too. And somebody said housing here is expensive. Wait a minute, was that Carol? I'm not sure because my LinkedIn stopped showing me comments, even though I still see them over here on StreamYard. So, yeah, that's an interesting one. So, yeah, so somebody said housing here is expensive. I'm assuming in Colorado, and I do know housing is very expensive in Colorado. It is very expensive.
So you started to talk about the retirement, and that, I mean, other than all the loopholes that she had in being able to send $100 million to herself with no proof of work, is this whole fact that she gets to retire because she is a contractor, not actually military personnel.
Yeah, so let's talk about that for 1 minute, because what kind of message does that send? And I'll explain to you where I'm going with that. So most of you know I spent a majority of my career as a chief auditor or somehow involved in auditing and or risk management. And I worked for a couple of places where we did some investigations where people were doing some extremely egregious things. I remember one case in particular, two cases in particular, where people were doing some things maliciously and egregiously. You knew that they were doing them. I mean, I interviewed the people and they admitted to doing the things that were done. And the organization did not terminate them. They allowed them to retire and allowed them to keep their full pension. And after they were gone, people within the organization would come to me and say, how could they have been allowed to keep their pension for doing the things that they've done? So that sends a bad message. It erodes the culture in the organization when people can cost the organization millions of dollars and then still be allowed to retire. And in one particular instance, I remember asking the management team, why did you let them keep their retirement? Here's the ripple effect on the organization. And I got all kinds of excuses. Well, they were good people. Yeah, but they did bad things. Sometimes good people do bad things, or a bad thing, right? But it really ruins the organizational culture when people do really bad things and they're allowed to do things like keep retirement benefits or receive huge payouts and things like that.
Well, I think in this case, it was their hands were tied based on U.S. Code Section 8312, which, from what they quoted, was an individual may be denied an annuity or retired pay on basis of service of the individual if the individual is convicted of treason, rebellion, or insurrection. or
There you
other
go.
similar offenses, but no authority for denying pay based on conviction of other offenses. So they said, oh, she was, well, I guess what? She showed up mid-December for the hearing and decided to retire within 6 weeks and full benefits. So yeah, that was the other thing they were just absolutely on fire about within the military, is how she can get away with that part of it. But convicted, if she's convicted, will spend the rest of her life in prison, more than likely.
Yeah. And so now let's go back to Bob's point, because that is what her lawyers said in court. Her lawyers said, listen, based on this law, you can't take away her retirement benefits. So, with that said, here's what I want to do. I want you to check out the most recent episode of my podcast, Audit Bites, because the title of that episode is Here's Why Auditors Always Harp on Policies. Policies are important, but sometimes policies can be stupid. And as auditors, we always write people up. They didn't follow the policy. Well, how about also looking at, did the policy actually make sense? So I want you to go to your favorite podcasting platform and check out the last 2 episodes. The last one is titled Why Auditors Always Harp on Policies. Thank you, Bob, for that segue, because that's exactly where I wanted to go with that. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Not planned at all. Not planned at all. Now, the funny thing in that attorney, she earned it. I don't see how they're related. So this must be, one of those really good attorneys. Don't see how they're related. But then his next comment in one article was, we expect a large portion of the assets will be recovered.
Yeah. So, okay. So now I've got to, we talk about this a lot on this show as well, how when you look at the corporate speak, the way people present things, it's always this polished nonsense. And that's their way of saying, well, we're going to get the money back. So that's almost like full restitution. No harm, no foul, right? No, it's a lot of harm and it's a lot of foul. But it kind of speaks to the society that we live in, where a lot of people can do a lot of harm to a lot of other people, and then all of a sudden say, oops, I didn't mean that, or somehow justify the bad behavior, and then it's all of a sudden okay. So yeah, they probably will get back a lot of the money based on the items that they collected that they're going to sell at auction.
Yeah, but even at auction, they're not going to bring, unless it's some of those things will bring good money based on them being collector items. But you talk about the harm, look at over 6 years, she diverted $100 million from a program that was supposed to enrich the lives of children on, I believe, at least on base, if not in surrounding community areas. And that money didn't go to those services, so that the people that, or the kids that could have used those services from a legitimate vendor, missed out on that opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. So you bring up another good point. What about the children that weren't served by that program? What happened to them? Like, what happened to the children that were not served by the program that she called CHILD, CHYLD? She called it the CHILD program, and I'm trying to look up real quick what the acronym was. And
I found it.
You good? Yep. Thank you.
Child Health and Youth Lifelong Development.
Yep. So, what happened to the children who were actually supposed to be serviced by that program? Because it's not like she actually had a program and she overinflated the dollar amounts. There was absolutely no program at all, according to documentation.
Yeah, just straight theft.
Yeah. Now, Marsha's saying, would you lose your pension deposits if you defraud the government if convicted? And I think Bob already covered that. And then Michael says, will there be more stringent financial and auditing checks and balances now since this happened? You'd like to think so, but when you just look at it, I think the federal government probably needs more help when it comes to the auditors who audit grants and contracts that they divvy out. And so there may be a lapse there because they do it on a risk basis, which seems like this would have bubbled up though to be very risky. But when you think about the total Army budget as a whole, it may have only been a drop in the bucket. So maybe they need to kind of niche down when it comes to the risk. Like, here's this particular element of Army operations. Here are the grants that come out of the Army. Here, so who knows? And again, when you look at the Army's budget, I can see how $100 million could probably go unnoticed as a whole. But if you do a niche down risk assessment, nah. So yeah, not that I'm defending the Army. I'm just saying from a risk standpoint, their total budget, if you do it like that, I can see where that could be missed.
Well, and there was a point that I saw that they've increased some of the control measures. Let's see what they had. Increased oversight and separation of duties would be helpful, and reduce the number of staff with signature authority to issue payments. So they would have been working on this since August when it came to light, even though I guess the indictment didn't happen until December.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is too, you have Army bases located throughout the world, and some of them are in like small towns where there's only one or two people actually manning the office. And so it's hard to tell how many people you have and what the office infrastructure really looks like. But I think as more stories come out, these kind of serve as a warning and are kind of helpful to Army auditors and Army personnel, Army management teams. So yeah, it's yeah.
And on that retirement piece, I would think that there's some senators or congressmen that are saying, wait a minute, we've got these for severe treasonous acts, but what about financial? This was a significant cost. I mean, grand scheme, probably not, but 100 million, it's the biggest fraud in Army history to date. So I would think that they would come back and review what those policies are if they aren't military personnel.
Which goes back to what I said about policies. Any auditors working for the Army or looking at this, yes, we have a lot of policies that tell us how we should operate, but over time they may become stale and some policies may be outdated. So don't forget the most recent episode of Audit Bites. Well, the second most recent episode now, because I released another one this morning, I think. Why auditors always harp on policies. Policies are important, but we need to evaluate the policies themselves to make sure that they are still relevant and accurate. Check out that episode. Let me know what you think. Leave us a 5-star review in the Apple App Store. All right. Bob is looking at me like, wait a minute, I didn't see that one coming.
I did it again. I don't know.
All right. So did I miss anything on this one, Bob? Did we miss anything? Wait, where's Christine? Did we miss anything, Christine?
You know what we didn't mention? I don't think there was a teddy bear, but there was Louis Vuitton.
Oh, wait, I missed the Louis Vuitton. Where was it?
Yeah.
What? Wait.
Oh, man. Me going back to find it's going to be another story. That was part of what she spent in retail purchases.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh, I found it.
Completely missed that.
Seized Louis Vuitton purses, other luxury brand accessories. But doesn't say to the tune of how much. At least not there. Jewelry and clothing. Yeah. No teddy bears.
Very interesting. All right. So I think Christine may be tired of us now. So I think she may have left. So she's like, I can't carry you all every week. All right. So what else you got there, Bob? Anything else?
And I think she did enough damage, and I think we did enough damage on her. That
Yeah, I
covered all
think
the
you
big
might be
stuff.
right.
Oof. Yeah.
Oh, so for organizations, internal controls, separation of duties, um, you know, you just want to check your employees. You just want to check to make sure that they are doing the things that they are supposed to do, because it's really hard nowadays, and especially when you look at a lot of companies are doing layoffs, a lot of people are losing jobs, so you never know what people might do in order to make money. So, on that note, any final words, Bob?
I found it. $43 million. $24 million on retail, which would include Louis Vuitton. 10 million on jewelry, almost 11 million on jewelry, 8 million on vehicles. So yeah, serious amounts of money. And that was between 2021 and 2023, December of 21 and May of 23. Was she married with a family? I see Michael's comment. Yeah. She's actually her first husband, or at least a prior husband, was deceased when she filed bankruptcy, went 5 years through bankruptcy. That was, I don't remember the term, but it was finalized in 2017. And at that point, she married her current husband, who has not been charged in any of this. But at that point, they went on the shopping spree of 31 properties in 5 states. Yeah, 130,000 in travel. Yep.
Yeah, I almost forgot about that. But honestly, that actually seems low for travel, considering the amount of money spent on retail therapy.
Yeah, the 130,000 didn't do anything after we talk about millions on those other things spent. But yeah.
Wow. Wow. Insane.
Yeah.
It, you know, hmm. Oh, never mind. I'll just save that thought for another episode. I'm just, hmm. It just seems odd after you come out of bankruptcy. That's a terrible thing to go through, bankruptcy. And at some point you have to be at rock bottom to even consider it and then to go through it. But they comb through everything that you have, everything that you own. And it's kind of, it's an unsettling experience. I've not gone through bankruptcy, but it's an unsettling experience. And I get it, but I would think that after that, you would probably become something like a minimalist. You'd reduce the amount of things that you have because you just don't want anything anymore. Like you don't have a taste or a thirst for a lot of stuff because it kind of weighs you down. Because you get stripped of everything in the bankruptcy process. Like
most of it. Yeah.
you lose most of your stuff. Like in some states, there's a dollar amount on the stuff that you can keep, but that dollar amount is very small. It's a very small amount. Then you can lobby to keep other things like your car so that you can go to work. You can lobby to keep your home if it's paid off sometimes, but oftentimes you have to sell your home if you file for bankruptcy. It just depends on what state you live in. So that's a weird one.
Yeah, and she flaunted it. So, I mean, one of the big flags is how people show, does their lifestyle match? That's what the IRS went after. The lifestyle didn't match what was within her, what she was making. And, you got to wonder what she actually drove to work. And if she only had 130,000 in travel, where was she going places? Where was she going and how often? If she's going East Coast, up in the mountains and different spots. So
the other thing that I just thought about too is with those homes as big as they were, she probably had someone on staff. So now somebody else has lost a job, or some other people have lost a job too, because there's no way the upkeep of those homes at least required you to outsource your lawn care, your cleaning, and things like that. But I imagine with some of them, the ones with like 30 rooms, you probably had somebody that at least stayed on site, at least part-time.
Yeah, that Maryland property, especially. You had a picture
Yeah.
of that one. That was huge.
Yeah, yeah. Now, yeah, Michael says, will the indictment include restitution of the money embezzled or just jail time only? They already have seized certain properties and they're going to try and recoup some of the money by selling some of the stuff at auction.
Oh,
So,
and the
yeah.
100 head of cattle, the 100 head of Japanese beef.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I forgot about that.
We didn't even mention that. It wasn't a huge operation. They had about 100 head in that, and I'm not even going to butcher the name of the special Japanese cattle on a ranch.
But even at 100 head, for the type of beef that it was worth a lot.
Mhm.
Yeah, I completely forgot about that one.
Yeah.
Look, I'm looking at the LinkedIn chat and people are laughing. They're sending up the laugh emoji. Yeah, the cattle. There was just entirely too much. I can't even remember it all. Yeah. All right. Anyway, on that note, we'll see you all next week.